Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Drake at Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry, author Julia Glass, and ASL interpreter Gay. Julia is the author of novels Vigil Harbor, A House Among the Trees, and The Dark Sacred Night, The Widower's Tale, The Whole World Over, and a National Book Award winning 3 Junes, as well as the Kindle Single Chairs in the Rafters. I See You Everywhere, a collection of linked stories, won a 2009 SUNY, State University of New York, John Gardner Fiction Award. Julia's personal essays and short stories have been widely anthologized. That's a hard word sometimes for me to get out. And she has won fellowships for the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. She is a co-founder of 20 Summers, a nonprofit incubator for arts and ideas in Provincetown, a board member of the Provincetown Book Festival, and a senior distinguished writer in residence at Emerson College. Julia is also an enthusiastic badminton player and lives in Marblehead with her husband and their 2 elderly corgis, which we talked about during the interview. So you'll have to go there if you want to find out more. Julia, we're so excited and looking forward to what you have to share with us today.
Thank you, Diane. It's great to be with you guys again. I really enjoyed our interview, which I think I was dressed for weather a lot warmer than so I'm in my same spot though. And in attendance are my elderly corgis to either side of me, and I hope they will behave themselves. So I think we talked a little bit about my latest novel, which came out a couple of years ago, called Vigil Harbor, and it's set in a town very much like Marblehead, where I live, a fictional coastal town to the north of Boston, just a tiny bit in the future, at a time when a lot of the things that keep us up at night, that have us arguing at the holiday table, are a lot more pronounced than they are now. But it's very much a recognizable world. And as in all my other novels, I write about families, love relationships, community relationships. So as I reassured a friend of mine before it came out, it is not dystopian. And I think that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the very beginning of it. The novel is told in the voices of 8 characters who, over the course of a week, their lives are intertwined, and there's a very significant event that affects the entire community. But there's also kind of an omniscient, godlike voice who looks down on this town. And I'm just going to read some from the very beginning, the introduction to this group of characters and their story. Let's say it's true that geography is destiny, place entwined with person. Would living on a peninsula, promontory, headland, bluff, make you peninsular by nature? Not someone who sticks out, but someone who likes backing up to a body of water, who finds a cul-de-sac comforting, not cornering. You'd miss out on casual, unpredictable commerce with travelers merely passing through, because your town would be a place of beginnings and endings, of retreat or stasis. And after a while, you'd likely notice a sameness to your neighbors. You'd all be a bunch of proud peninsulites, privileged, but also myopic. That's how some outsiders see the people of Vigil Harbor, a town that thrusts itself into the Atlantic Ocean, all but completely enclosed by restless water, deflecting the longshore current like a crooked foot aimed straight toward the rising sun. On a map, the harbor itself resembles a long blue parcel held snug beneath a muscular arm against the Massachusetts coastline. At the big toe, 2 of the town's oldest roads rise toward a park with a view raised high by granite cliffs. The shoreline here is rugged with rock, nothing like the bygone aprons of silken sand that once turned neighboring towns into summer playgrounds. Much of that sand recently eroded by pummeling rains and swallowed by storms that no longer repay the ground they borrow. That park is where residents gather every year to watch their fireworks on a 4th of July that lasts for days. In spirit, not much has changed on this day for a couple hundred years. Not through depressions, recessions, pandemics, and definitely not during wartime. In wartime, town pride swells like a spinnaker in a sailing race at the yacht club. It begins at dawn. For 2 hours, the bells of the 3 remaining churches ring with abandon. At 8 a.m., shame on those who sleep in, veterans of wars and invasions from Vietnam to Venezuela march the twisting colonial ways or wave from an antique trolley, the high school marching band preceding them with off-key pomp and drumming. The Girl and Boy Scouts follow in turn like a ragtag militia, and a small fleet of jewel-toned vintage automobiles creeps along behind, claxons blaring, the caboose to this train, a 1969 powder blue Volkswagen convertible, owned and driven by the longest-standing elected official, a fourth-generation Harborite named June Smithson. The parade ends at the old burial ground, where 400 revolutionary patriots, most of them fishermen who tossed aside their nets to form George Washington's Navy, lie beneath slabs, half swallowed by the earth, their epitaphs worn thin as a whisper. June lays a wreath on the grave of a different soldier every year, his name pulled from a big mason jar of names by the town historian. So that just gives you a taste of the book. Many other voices to come. And as I said, it's set a little bit in the future. And what I really wanted to capture in that book was what it's like to live in a town that is constructed of the stories that have accumulated for centuries, and yet to, go forward into stories, trying to imagine, the accrual of further stories yet. So that's an introduction to that. But since you invited me to give a sampling, I thought, something that I don't often do is read from my nonfiction, because throughout the course, although I am mainly a novelist, I'm also an essayist, and I've published many personal essays. Some of them actually very humorous, and some of them very serious. Some of them about being a mother, some about being a cancer patient, all kinds of subjects. But I was asked about 10 years ago to contribute to a collection called Letter to a Stranger, Essays to the Ones Who Haunt Us. And what the editor wanted was for people, it was mainly aimed at travel writers. So people who have been given an assignment to go abroad and write, and then they have some off the path encounter with someone that haunts them, but is not something that they necessarily bring into their main writing. And although I'm not strictly speaking a travel writer, I've done a very little amount of travel writing. I thought about this encounter that I had when I was traveling in Europe the year after college. I had a fellowship to paint. I was mainly a painter in Europe. And so I'm going to read this letter that I wrote. And it's called To the Italian Whose Name I Lost.
Oh, dear.
Set in Florence, Italy. I am dismayed to realize just now that I no longer remember your name, and that I have misplaced the small maroon book I carried everywhere that year, in which you wrote down and then aggressively inked out your address and phone number. This was way before email. This was in June of 1979. I was 23 years old, 9 months into a year-long fellowship to live and paint, no academic strings attached, in Paris, and to roam from city to city looking at works of art that I had studied only in books. Who, on such an odyssey, would miss Italy or Greece? But to travel alone through those countries as a woman was considered sheer suicidal lunacy.
Yes.
So I had set out with another woman, one whom I thought of as a new friend. Quickly, however, we discovered that we were not compatible travelers. And I discovered that she was a bully. In the train from Venice to Florence, she delivered one of those eviscerating, know what your problem is tirades. We parted ways on the platform. The next morning, I faced the decision of whether to push on, traveling solo as a very young, very blonde, not especially intrepid American woman, or tuck tail and head back to Paris. First, however, I would enjoy one day in this extravagantly civilized city. I had read that to steer clear of man trouble, I should dress nicely and, swelter be damned, modestly. Skirts below the knee, sleeves to the elbow, and never, ever shorts or t-shirts. Hardly my style to begin with. My tiny suitcase was packed with discreet attire, including silky dresses from my grandmother, dresses you'd wear for dancing to Bunny Berrigan on the Victrola. That day, I chose the prettiest to raise my spirits. So there I was, wandering the paths of the Boboli Gardens in an antique party dress patterned with green foliage, stitched with opalescent sequins, when you approached me and said, grinning, "Hello, miss. Would you like a guide? I do not charge." I read your accent as British, an assumption reinforced by your pale, fiercely freckled skin and curly red hair. You wore a pair of thick-lensed glasses, giving you the look of a benignly mad professor. The gardens were safely crowded, and saying yes spared me from brooding about my inconvenient solitude. You were indeed knowledgeable, expressively so, about the history of the garden, the palace, and the Medicis who'd lived there. From the lilt of your phrasing and the flaws in your grammar, I realized you were Italian, not English. How pleased you were by my confusion. You lived and worked in Lucca, but your favorite pastime on days off was to take a bus to Florence, where you honed your English by introducing yourself to Anglophone tourists. So we had ourselves a bargain. I would converse, you would edify. You were well-mannered, just a few years older than I, and passionately curious about my culture as well as my language. Was the Pitti Palace closed that day? Perhaps. I don't know why we didn't go inside. You asked if I would like to see other gardens, villas, the homes of modern-day Medicis. Logically, I hesitated. But then I recalled how my friend had hectored me for being too timid. You waited, your eyes larger than life behind your glasses. Sure, I said. Let's go. In sandals, in my grandmother's frock, in the noonday heat of an Italian June, I followed you. Just like that, we were trekking through hedgerows and overgrown meadows, along cypress-cloistered lanes that led, as you promised, to views through iron gates of old, ornate houses, all seemingly deserted, their gardens luxuriant with oleander, poppies, and roses, teeming with bees. Sequins in my dress snagged on briars. My feet blistered. I felt my face and arms growing red, my complexion as pale as yours. All the while we talked. You knew botany as well as art. You even knew the sky. When I marveled at the towering Tintoretto clouds, clouds I had never imagined as real, you told me their Latin name. You talked about your longing to visit America, about your only childhood. A good childhood, summers spent outdoors on the streets of Lucca and in the pine forests of Elba, an island I'd pictured as barren, Napoleon's final prison. I must let you show me Elba one day, as well as Lucca. Lucca, you bragged, produced the world's best olive oil. I must taste it. When we reached a wide, sloping field near the summit of our hike, we paused to catch our breath. You looked around with an impish smile. You closed your eyes and spread your arms, scarecrow style. What on earth were you doing? Now, I thought, now he turns into a psycho. Now I'm in serious man trouble. But a few minutes later, you opened your eyes and shrugged. When you were a child, you said, sometimes you would find a field like this, and you would hold your arms out straight, keeping perfectly still for a long while until butterflies alighted on your body. No, I said, Not really. But yes, absolutely. This was no lie. As an adult, however, you seemed to have lost your uncanny magnetism. Still, now and again, you would try. At last, we reached a hilltop village. I asked if you would join me for dinner. Alas, you had to get back to Lucca. But I must visit you there on my way to Greece. I handed you my notebook. Resting it on the hood of a car, you wrote studiously, legibly. I remember the quaint spiral of your nines. When will you come? You asked in your quirky Britalian accent. I told you I wasn't sure. I had to figure some things out first. But I must know you will come. Your tone was urgent. I thanked you for the beautiful day. I told you that, honestly, I could not make a firm plan that very moment. I could call you in a day or two, and you snatched back the book, took out your pen, and blacked out everything you'd written. Wait, I must have said. What you said next, I remember perfectly. I will not be able to support it. Will she come? Will she not come? Will she come? Will she not come? No, I prefer to say goodbye. Tearfully, but also angrily, you walked away. I stood there for a while. I told myself there was nothing tragic here, no regrets. Your childlike obliteration of your name unsettled me. I didn't dare think about how lonely you were. My grandmother's dress was ruined. I had the worst sunburn of my life. But after another 2 days in Florence, I traveled on by myself to Rome, Athens, Sunion, Delphi, Mykonos, followed by a grueling train trip all the way back to Paris. I haven't thought of you, not attentively, in years. Still, I'm dismayed to have forgotten your first name. Marco? Enzo? Gianni? But as I began this letter, something hit me. I am in the middle of writing a novel, and wrapped up in its convoluted plot is a solitary boy named Ivo. He exists only in a children's picture book, but it's a very famous, fictitiously famous picture book. He survives an earthquake and wrestles with an enchanted panther. At the climax of that book within a book, Ivo stands in a forest clearing and holds out his arms. Small birds and butterflies land on his body. And that's when he saves the world. So
Nice.
Delightful.
But so here's the thing that, I read it at a benefit to raise money for this endeavor. And actually, Letter to a Stranger is something you can subscribe to online. And once every week or two, you get one of these letters to a stranger. And they're absolutely, they're all over the map, literally, and they're different and they're fascinating, written by people of all ages. But what was so eerie is that I was writing it, and I was indeed in the middle of writing my novel, A House Among the Trees, which is about what happens in the aftermath of the death of a world famous children's book author and illustrator, kind of based on Maurice Sendak, but it's fictional. And that image, and as I was writing this letter, I realized that's where that image came from, the image that I use in the book within a book. And that was very eerie because, obviously there are all these cross wirings and connections in our brains and our imagination, but sometimes you don't even stop to think where did that image come from? And I realized that it had come from this very eccentric young man. I mean, I searched so hard for that maroon book, which I know made it to this house in Marblehead, somewhere in the chaos. It is somewhere, but I could not someday. Well, my children will probably find it and wonder about it. So
Scratched out name.
Yeah, no, he really blacked it out. I mean, I remember that very vividly. And, I don't know, part of me thinks, well, what was my problem? Maybe I should have gotten on the bus to Lucca with him, but I really wasn't that kind of I had a lot of adventures, but not adventures like that one. So I just thought it might be fun to read the very beginning of my novel, A House Among the Trees. Just which
Wonderful.
mentioned in it. So this is the beginning of chapter 1 of A House Among the Trees. Today, the actor arrives. Awake too early, too nervous for breakfast. Coffee alone makes her more nervous still. Fretful over what to wear, then irritated at caring so much. Tommy patrols the house that is now hers, shockingly and entirely hers. Not just her bedroom and all it contains, but everything she can see from its 2 windows. 7 acres of gardens and grass and quickening fruit trees. Fieldstone walls and stacks of wood, shed and garage and hibernating pool. The sky above. Does she own that too? Owning the sky would be easy. The sky would be a gift. The sky weighs nothing. The sky is unconditional. She roams and circles through rooms she knows by heart: living room, dining room, kitchen, den, mudroom, pantry, porch. She cannot enter a room these days without beginning a mental inventory. What to keep, what to give away. Worse, far worse, how much of it will she sell? What to give away, sorry about that. Worse, far worse, how much of it will she sell? She goes to and from the studio, back and forth between this world and that. In that one, he simply must be alive. So many times that her skirt is now damp from brushing against the tight-fisted buds of the peonies flanking the path. She have to change again? The birds are in prime song, the sun beyond a promise, the day upon them all. 5 hours to fill, and Tommy has no idea how. So that novel is about what happens when this world-famous Maurice Sendak-like author dies quite suddenly. A healthy guy in his 70s who is so, and I always, I'm always yelling at my own husband about getting up on the roof. And so this Morty, this author, insists on getting up on his own roof to remove a fallen tree branch, and he falls to his death. And so all of a sudden, and his will is read, and he had just recently redone his will, leaving complete control of his literary estate in the hands of this young woman, Tommy, who is the person who lives with him in his house, not as a lover, but as a kind of helpmeet, as an assistant. And the whole, literary and art world are focused on her, and how in the world did she get given this responsibility? And there is an actor who has been cast to play that famous author in a biopic, and who is supposed to arrive. He was scheduled to arrive to meet the man he's going to play, and he is coming even though she's dreading his arrival, and he is a newly minted movie star. So I think, as I said, I think I remember in our interview, I probably talked about how of all my books, I don't have favorites because they're like my children, but that one was the most fun to write because I got to indulge in really bringing in my own life as a visual artist, which I pursued through my 20s. And also, we're all passionate about the movies, and imagining what it's like to be somebody who has just gone from being a working actor to being an Oscar-winning star, and all those worlds come together in that book. And so I really had a blast writing that one. So I think I have some time, right? I'm going to read from an essay I wrote. I was commissioned again to write something. And I realized looking at this book is close to 20 years old. Time, it's scary, but this is a wonderful, very well-reviewed anthology. I'll show the cover because it's kind of fun. I know you can see that. It's called Kiss Tomorrow, Hello. Notes from the Midlife Underground by 25 women over 40. Oh, wow. I am now well over 40. So I wrote an essay about the most challenging part of my life. And I'm going to try to summarize here, but in my mid-30s, I went through first a divorce, and right on the heels of that, I was diagnosed with cancer. And on the heels of that, my only sibling killed herself. And so my mid-30s were the absolute hit of my life. And obviously, writing was very important to me then. And I actually wrote a number of essays about my experience going through cancer treatment and so on and so forth. Well, I got through that initial period, and after a couple of years, when my doctors deemed me, in possibly cured, though they never like to talk in those terms, I had first one child and then another child, my two sons, who are now in their 20s. And then something bad happened, which was that in 2001, I had a recurrence. And here I am all these years later. I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet. And I went through very, very serious cancer treatment this time around. And I talk in this essay about what I went through in that period. And I'm going to read the last couple pages of the essay. I hope I have time.
Oh, yeah.
Because I managed, what?
You have 30 minutes.
Oh, okay. So the title of this essay is "I Have a Crush on Ted Geisel." And I don't know if everyone knows this, but do you know who Ted Geisel is?
No.
Dr. Seuss.
Oh, okay.
So, what this piece is about what it's like to go through all of this, this whole cancer treatment. When you have two very small children.
Oh, yeah.
I had an infant and a 5-year-old.
Gosh.
And also we lived in Lower Manhattan, and it was 2001. And I had my first chemotherapy treatment when 9/11 happened.
Oh my gosh.
Now, that's a whole story unto itself. And I have written about that too. And I had a very inquisitive 5-year-old. So yeah, life was never dull at this moment. But I'm going to skip ahead to 6 months after that when, and by the way, so 3 Junes, my first novel was published in 2002. And that was the light at the end of the tunnel. I had sold it to the publisher. And my only prayer, was, can I please get a little bit of hair back before I go on book tour? And I did.
Wow.
If you look at the pictures of me from when I was on book tour for 3 Junes, I look kind of like a Ken doll. I have like this very, very, very short hair, but I had hair to go on my book tour. So anyway, so I'll read this one. Okay. After the chemo, my hair grew out, still blonde, but curly for a change. Eventually, it straightened out again. And though I'm now nearing 50, it still has yet to gray. I consider it a lovely souvenir of my glib, easy youth, but I've decided to keep it short. It used to be actually quite long. Last week, out of the blue, Alec, my older son, asked me, "Mom, when will your hair get long again?" Startled, I asked if he could remember it long. He said that he could, and he liked it better that way. "But you remember how I lost it all when I had to take that medicine, right?" I asked. "No," he said, looking puzzled. He remembers the more youthful, long-haired mother, it turns out, but not the half-year of hell she went through. Or he remembers, defiantly, the mother she'd have been without the chemo. Is that reassuring? What else that I assume he knows does he, in fact, not know, not notice? As I feel myself age and complain about it and fear that my boys won't have a mother for as long as they deserve, I realize how lucky I am to be aging at all. 13 years ago, a dogged, fussy radiologist did not like the look of a perfectly routine baseline mammogram. I may be alive because of that man, a man I met only once. I curse the hot flashes I still have, but how can I not bless them as well? I should say that chemotherapy, this is very personal, right? But chemotherapy threw me into menopause, like just a trampoline. And I was told to expect that. So I actually say it's something I didn't really have to endure over a long period of time. So anyway, that's what I was referring to there. Let me see if I can go back to where it was. I might never have lived to find out just how crazy those hot flashes could make me. An older friend of mine told me years ago that you're entering menopause when you find yourself getting crushes not on the young hotties in the movies you pay a babysitting ransom to go out and watch with your husband, not on Matt Damon, Colin Farrell, or even Johnny Depp, who's aging too, but on Christopher Plummer in The Sound of Music and Dick Van Dyke in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. The movies you plug into the VCR for the kids so that you can get something done around the house. Except that you sit down, oddly transfixed, and watch them too, and become engulfed in their courtly, fusty charm. And you look at Julie Andrews, or the bubbly blonde who never found stardom, and find yourself thinking, "Excuse me, missy, but you are way too young for him." Well, my midlife crush is on Ted Geisel, Dr. Seuss to you. There are distinct disadvantages to this crush, I admit. That he's dead isn't really the issue, since he would be unattainable anyway. If he were alive, he'd be 100 years old right now. And if he were attainable, that would be fine by me. On certain days, like yesterday, which I spent sledding with my boys, I feel about 100 too. No, the biggest problem is that there isn't much fodder for my crush. As I idle in grocery store checkout lines, I will never be able to snatch up a magazine revealing, say, the inside of Ted's stylish home. The bedroom suite decked alluringly with the hides of animals, of sneetches, of drum-tummied snums, where lately he cavorted with the likes of J.Lo and Paris Hilton. Unlike Ben Affleck and P. Diddy, Ted Geisel, while he was alive and young, seemed to be something of a geezer, courtly and fusty. He loved only Helen. And after her tragic death, he loved only Audrey. If more went on behind closed doors, the tabloids will never reveal it. About his work, by contrast, there is all too much conjecture. Critics prone to jealous spite speculate that Dr. Seuss's never having children of his own surely reveals that he never liked children at all and so must have led an emotionally stunted life. And we all know by now about the political agenda in his books. Children who giggle over his drawings may not realize that the source of their amusement is nuclear escalation, deforestation, or anti-Semitism. Yes, I know that the Whos are the people of occupied Japan. I have even read that Ted's oeuvre simmers with intimations of child neglect, if not child abuse. I believe, however, that he wrote primarily, far above all, for the pleasure of his readers, children and parents both. To read Dr. Seuss aloud feels to me a lover of language, as I imagine it would feel to water ski like a pro, which I will never do because when it comes to the physical, I am a consummate sissy. I adore him for that playfulness alone. Let me throw in a few narcissistic interpretations of my own. First, the cat in the hat is about being treated for cancer. You may try to convince me that the cat is General Patton or General Mills, the Soviet Union, or a premonition of Bill Gates. Would IBM be the house or the mother? But seriously, take a close look at the cat's persona. Likeable yet arrogant, irresistibly bossy, well-meaning yet oblivious, assured yet sometimes alarmingly clumsy, he is, no doubt about it, the medical establishment. Thing one and thing two are surgery and radiation. The recently departed mother is your breezy impunity, your assumptions that the best is yet to come. The narrator and Sally are your ego, cowed at first, then accepting, then angry, then finally assertive. The fish is your pesky id. Pessimists note the ultimate return of the mother, which makes The Cat in the Hat Comes Back a parable about recurrence and chemotherapy. That platoon of tiny cats from A to Z are the drugs themselves, playing havoc with your body, staining everything peony pink, and in one great final explosion, you hope, cleaning up the mess they made and your cancer too. Except that from here on out, for Sally and her brother, life will never, never be the same. After all, can they assume they've seen the back of that cat for good? How silly could they be? All they can do is follow that neatly shoveled zigzag path back to their house. Who knows whether the table will be set with hot chocolate and cookies or lima beans and Spam. I love Ted because, like me, he took a few decades to hit his professional stride, to find the one thing he was meant to do. I love him because he looks a little like a penguin, but also in his youth, a teensy bit like Montgomery Clift. But I am smitten with Ted because he gives a perfect cadence to life as it escalates in both its absurdity and its beauty, to the relentlessly goofy observations that run through our heads all day, but that we generally keep to ourselves. If once upon a time the rhythms of my life felt like those of a square dance, now they feel a lot like the Dear Doctor's madcap poetry, with its ragtime patter and its precociously Dylan-esque rhymes. Recently, I spent most of an afternoon in yet another new doctor's office, most of it, as usual, in his waiting room. I had just changed cities, which meant changing oncologists, and so, yet again, I telescoped my complex, unruly medical tale into a giddy, self-deprecating rendition, my illnesses, my choices, my vices, my triumphs. The history gets a little longer every time I tell it, but the central drama remains the same. This latest doctor was attentive and kind, and he offered an optimistic outlook for the future of women with cancers like mine. I went away happy and relieved. Yet that night I had trouble going to sleep, because once again the hardest, murkiest part of my past had been stirred up from the depths, like the mat of blackened leaves that festers at the bottom of even the clearest pond. I felt the familiar, uncomfortable mixture of sorrow, regret, relief, and gratitude. Unlucky me. No, lucky me. That night, putting 3-year-old Oliver to bed, I had read from our well-used copy of One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. In my own bed, in the dark, I gave myself over to the rhythm of its piecemeal ditties, composing a rope of verse about the state of my aging body and my complex feelings, grandiose, humble, resentful, about being the mother who is sometimes mistaken for grandma. I went to sleep spinning this nonsense, and in the morning, greeting myself in the mirror, took up where I had left off. My face is lined, my teeth are gray, my chin's become a lump of clay. Just like my memory, did you say? Wait a minute, did who say? My thermostat's busted, my wrists have rusted, I can't remember when last I lusted. My eyesight is shifty, my bones are shrinking. Having kids so late, what was I thinking? Young mom, old mom, wise mom, silly mom, early to rise mom, over the hilly mom. That one has an SUV. This one has a tricky knee. That one has a yoga mat. This one wears a chemo hat. That one can give you a piggyback ride. This one remembers the Dave Clark 5. Say, would you like a mom who's an ingenue? An ingenue from Timbuktu? Or how about a mom who's a blushing bride from Telluride? We have a mom whose hair is blue, whose lap is the size of a war canoe, who wears trifocals and an orthopedic shoe, who cries, in with the old and out with the new. She can't play Twister, but we like our mom, even if she looks like an old grande dame. She's not always calm, and she's not always sunny. She seems to worry a lot about money. But when times are bad, even bad and a half, she still knows how to make us laugh. All right, I'll stick to novels. Dr. Seuss would never be so heavy-handed. Almost invariably, his life lessons come in wrapping paper as hokey as a square dance, frenetic as a subway station at rush hour, weird as a wax museum. The second book I read to Oliver that night was Oh, the Places You'll Go. Now that one does flirt with the preachy, but I love its shamelessly Odyssean themes, its grandfatherly tone, and I love the way that the book itself reveals, in its slightly vague and shaky drawings, how Dr. Seuss followed his passions until, at the age of 87, he died in his sleep. This is currently Oliver's favorite book, and he makes me linger on the same 3 pages, always asking the same questions. Why is he wearing roller skates? He asks of a certain blue elephant. He goes past him. He goes past him. He wonders anxiously when the elfin boy hero confronts the things that scare you right out of your pants on the road between hither and yon. And finally, insistently, always stalling our progress by slamming a small hand down on the page, he says, "Those are the hackin' cracks." Here, near the very end, is where the boy's arms get sore and his sneakers leak, where the weather is foul and where enemies prowl. Yes, those are the hackin' cracks, I answer. And I like to linger on that page too. Sometimes I get a little teary. How well I know those hackin' cracks, and how glad I am to be able to look at them in the safely two-dimensional, in their deceptively pink and lavender viciousness from the distance I've traveled. I've rowed that way before, at least twice, and I may well row that way again. And when I do, I will pack an extra pair of sneakers for my sodden feet, tiger balm for my aching arms, and hope that my sons, one or both, will read to me from the books of my beloved Ted. So,
Well,
thank you. I actually am a little teary. I picked that off the bookshelf, but I haven't looked at it in a while.
what a bunch of nice memories.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. People ask if my sons, who are now 23 and 28, read my books, and the answer is no. And my
Sweetie,
old,
you're muted.
It's fine.
anyway, were you going to ask me something, Diane?
No, Julia, go on.
So, so my older son was really, really the book lover. I mean, I read to them both throughout their childhoods, but my older son, who actually learned to read quite early and preferred to read to himself at an early age, which was sort of disappointing. It's like when he's like 6, it's like, I don't need you anymore. I got this. And I will say that as a mother, like all mothers who love books, you can't wait to share the joy of books with your children. But when I had to grow used to the fact that my older son could do it by himself. Just, I can tie my shoes, I can read my books. And the first time that I ever saw him reading to himself without reading the words out loud or mouthing the words to himself, I had the strangest emotion, and that was envy. Because I realized that private space that you have with a book is now his too, and it's private, and I'm not privy to that, and nor should I really, but I felt like I lost that a little too young with him. So he grew up into this amazing reader, and sometimes I would read along with him in his teens. If he loved a book, I might read this book too, and so when he went off to college, and he went to a very, very intellectual school where he did a lot of reading. And, I guess I maybe thought that he might want to read one of my books. And his roommate came home for Thanksgiving. He was a guy from California. And I was alone with his roommate, like the morning after Thanksgiving, with our computers at the table. And he said to me, trying to make conversation, he said, "So you're an author?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Oh, that's very cool." And he said, I asked Alec if he read your books, and he said no. And I said, "Do you know why?" And he said, "Well, actually, he told me." And I said, "Why?" And the roommate said to me, "Because he said he can't bear the thought that he has the fear of reading a sex scene written by his mother."
Oh.
It's a really good reason not to read your mom's books. But to the roommate, I said, "Not that you're going to pass this on to him, but while my mother is still alive, those scenes are rated PG because my mother reads my books." Anyway, yeah. I'd like to hope someday that maybe my kids would read some of the essays I wrote about my life as a mother.
Yeah.
Since I've my experience with the hack and cracks.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I hope that they do.
A couple times you've reminded me that sometimes we have 2 kids, I've talked with them, and I'll ask, this happened, I thought it was really cool. And, "Oh yeah, it happened? I don't remember it at all." And then they'll mention something that I completely don't remember, or it's like they have a very strong nostalgia for a plate or a spoon or some object around the house. And it's just this incidental thing in this huge mass of stuff. So all these things are extremely personal and idiosyncratic, the things that, the images that you remember that other people maybe don't. So they were just very important to you. Anyway, you reminded me of that a couple of times talking about yourself and your kids.
Yeah. It's no, I mean, I haven't even faced down. I mean, look, my house is full of stuff, but I haven't even faced the thought of asking my sons, do you think you're going to want this? I'm sure they're going to say, oh, not a bit of it, Mom. It's one thing you hear nowadays from people is our grown children don't like brown furniture, So if you have any, which means antiques or anything, kind of old timey, it's like, no, they don't want that. Why
but
have
they
that
might
at IKEA,
they might surprise you. They might say, I don't
Never
want
know.
that, but I want that spoon, some
Right.
other thing.
You never know.
Yeah.
I know that we're down toward the wire here, but I didn't know if there were any questions or is there anybody out there or are we?
We're here.
We're here.
And I think it's just a beautiful day outside. I mean, it is a lovely day. So I think
Yeah.
people are going to watch this later, which is wonderful. I really
Well,
appreciate
I'm really glad that you do this. It's a really such a rich archive that you obviously collected.
it. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
we enjoy it too. And we enjoy having authors like you with us. It's really
Oh,
wonderful.
it's been fun. And I remember how much I loved our interview because you asked me that surprise question at the end about something like, why does art matter? Is
Oh,
that
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
And I thought, oh no, but I think I rose to the occasion, maybe.
oh yeah.
of course you did.
I guess that comes of being a teacher. So
Well,
anyway,
I have to say, I love that you use the lab method with your children. I think I've mentioned this before, but it's so important to share the arts with children and to
yeah.
share the arts that we love, right? Our
Yeah.
enthusiasm and the warmth and just cuddling your child on your lap and reading to them with a book in front. I mean, it just teaches so much. When you were talking about the first time you saw your son reading
Mm.
in that private space, I remember it's a different type of moment, but my son was sitting on the ground in his bedroom with a picture book out,
Yeah.
and he was reading it, but he wasn't reading it. He had memorized everything I had read. And
Yeah.
his sister was sitting next to him and he was reading to her
Mhm.
as I'd read to them. It was
Mm.
such a sweet, sweet thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, when my older son, who was 5 years older than his little brother,
Mm.
came to the hospital the day, to visit us the day after his brother was born, he actually brought with him one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish,
Oh.
and read it to his teensy little brother who I was holding. I have a picture of that. It was just, the most, of course, that was the honeymoon period soon to end when you discover what it really meant to have a younger sibling.
Oh yeah. Mm.
I know it, yeah.
But yeah, we have
What
so
a
many.
sweet thing.
And my younger son at one point who loved being read to, and so books were not as much as important to him. He's a sportsy guy. He likes to be outside, be running, be
Mm.
active. And he said to me one day after he was in middle school or something, and he gestured at the bookcase in his bedroom, and he said, you can get rid of all those children's books now. And I said, oh, I am never getting rid of it. So actually, if our house collapses, it will be because in the attic are all these. I mean, really, I have so many children's books that I will never part with. I do not, I have passed things on to other children, but not the books. The books will never, and who knows how much they will or won't be treasured. But oh my God, I spent so much money on picture books when my children were. That was one thing
Mm.
I couldn't, I would never say no. And we lived in Manhattan near one of the greatest children's bookstores ever called Books of Wonder. And I think it still exists. I think it's there. And it was what my older son, he'd rather do that than go get ice cream. Yeah, no, really. He chose it over ice cream.
Oh yeah, I believe you. Yeah.
For Halloween, we put out candy, but we also put out books.
You do?
We do. We put out
Oh,
books for all ages, and people are just welcome to come. I've had some people
what a
just
great idea.
spend like 20, 30 minutes, and their parents are like, let's go. And there was, yeah, I had a series there too. And one moment, one girl, she was afraid to take more than the first book. She just didn't want to be greedy.
Oh,
So I
Oh,
introduced her to little free libraries, which are all over the place. She had no
we
idea.
have a lot of them too here. They're
Yeah.
popping up everywhere.
Yeah, we have one on our front yard, but yeah, they're a wonderful way to share reading with a community.
Yeah.
yeah. This year the refrain was, okay, happy Halloween. You can take one candy, one toy, and as many books as you like. And
Oh,
some of the kids, oh, candy, toy, yeah, thank you, and they leave. But other kids, oh, books, I'll skip the other stuff, thank you. So it depends on the
it
kid.
must be a very popular house at Halloween.
Sometimes
Yeah, yeah, it comes and goes.
people are doing more trunk and treats now, which is too bad, but anyway. Actually, that's my opinion. Some people really like them. So, but thank you so much, Julia. This
Yeah.
has been
Well, thank you again.
Thank you all out there for joining us for our November Arts Saturday. To purchase Julia's books, you can go to our bookshop. Where is our bookshop? Here we go. Oh, no, I brought up that first. Let me mention this. We do neighborhood talks, and we have about issues that people can bring forward. And Julia actually talked about breast cancer. A number of years ago, we interviewed Dr. Kelly McMillan, who's an OBGYN, about women's health. So please feel free to look at that. And there's another one I'm scrolling down here because we talked specifically about breast cancer. And so we have two on our YouTube channel that are specifically informational that would help with what Julia's talking about and her journey. And here we go. Here's our bookstore. Please feel free to go there because we do get a few cents for any books you purchase through our website, which would be very helpful.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. I'd also like to thank all our sponsors. If you'd like to donate, please feel free to go to drakeetarts.com/donate. No donation is too small to help us. Everything makes a difference. For more information about our Arts Saturdays, please go to our website, drakeetarts.com, or email us at drakeetarts@gmail.com. This and all our programs are archived on the Drake It Arts YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@drakeetarts. And that's all the information I have. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a great Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. It was just
Thank
delightful.
you both. Thank you all. And thank you, Gay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.